Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we are getting closer, folks, to the beginning of week one. So, want to talk about some decent injury news for the Vikings with their first official injury report of the year, along with a back and forth between myself and Kevin O'Connell about using bigger personnel and, of course, the title of the show tonight. The Vikings are favored to beat the Giants. Should they be? And I want all of your questions and comments as well. I'm interested what's on your mind. Every Wednesday night, this is going to be the plan, is to just pop on and chat with all of you about what you're thinking about the upcoming game, what questions are on your mind. So throw them in the chat. Anything that you're thinking about, I want to hear about it and answer everything that is on your football-y mind. So let's start with the injury report. It's not robust. It is Jalen Nailor and Jordan Addison, and both were limited in practice today, and they both have ankle injuries. The way that Kevin O'Connell talked about Jordan Addison's injury made it sound like there is a very good chance that he will be playing this weekend. And I will always caution when I give you Kevin O'Connell updates to say that sometimes he leans toward a little more optimistic than maybe is reality, that he oftentimes thinks that guys are going to come back a little bit more early than they actually do, or that injuries are a little less serious than they actually are. I think that's just his nature to be an optimistic person. But it's not always 100% if he says, yeah, we think someone's going to play, that they're guaranteed lock dead of the century to actually be out there playing. So we'll see. But I think that with Jordan Addison and how long he's had since that ankle injury, that he should be very close or ready to go when we get to week one. So the fact that he was out there, even in limited fashion, very good news for the Vikings. With Jalen Nailor, I know what you're all thinking. Yes, I know what you're all thinking. Jalen Nailor is on the injury report, huh? And I'll tell you the truth. I also thought that. This is a guy who each summer has shown so much potential. This year, he was terrific in training camp and looks like he can be a guy that is a deep threat for them. Third downs, second and long passing downs where the other team is focused so much on Justin Jefferson. And here comes Jalen Nailor to make a play. That's how you envision it happening. But if he doesn't get on the field, then it won't be happening. And you'll be seeing a lot more of Trent Sherfield, who brings a real toughness element to his game and doesn't seem to be banged up all the time. So it is concerning that Jalen Nailor is on the injury report. Kind of reminded me a little bit of last year with Marcus Davenport. It was the same sort of way where Davenport had a really good summer and looked like he was going to be a key part of the team, and then gets hurt right out of training camp in the first week and doesn't end up playing a whole lot. They need Jalen Nailor. He is better than Sherfield as far as a downfield threat. He's better than Tristan Jackson as far as a pure talent. If he can add something to this team, even if it's 30 catches, but he averages 15 yards a catch, that would be absolutely huge for them. If he's on the injury report every week and he's slowed by an ankle injury and then he's missing games, then I think that would be the end of the, hey, maybe Jalen Nailor run that we've had over the last couple of years of talking about what he can be. So he's only limited in practice. There's no reason to, at this moment, start saying, oh man, here we go again with Jalen Nailor. But the fact that he's limited may point to an opportunity to play. It will really be Thursday and Friday where we get a better look at whether he's going to be ready to go or not. But I think what the Vikings really have here in this receiving group, though, is that they don't have to rely on just one guy. In previous years, it felt like it was Jefferson, Thielen, Osborne, and no one else that you could really play. Whereas now they have other guys that can fit into certain roles. I can't forget, Brandon Powell did a pretty good job when he was in last year, filling in a couple of games, caught the game-winning pass against the Atlanta Falcons. I think Powell is a better route runner than you would think of when you think of a punt returner. Normally, when you think punt returner. It's just, well, that guy probably can't really catch the ball, can't really run routes. He just does one thing. But I don't think that's true for Brandon Powell. Maybe it was earlier in his career, but he can come out of the slot, get the ball in his hands, might be a guy who's pretty useful. And I mentioned Sherfield and Jackson. So they have 4 other receivers outside of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison who can fill different spots and different roles if Jalen Nailor is not able to play. At this moment, though, when someone's limited on a Wednesday, you think there might be a decent chance that he could be out there. And I just want to know with Jalen Nailor, the coaches have clearly seen really good things from him. We've seen really good things from him in training camp and in preseason and ever so briefly a couple years ago. I want to know if he can play. I want to see him become that deep threat because the talent is there. It's just been the health and the body has not held up for him. And he's not a particularly big guy. And it isn't quite like Sherfield, who's very muscular and looks like somebody you wouldn't want to go toe-to-toe with. He is more of a finesse type of downfield receiver, and that may be what leads to him getting banged up. But O'Connell said it was just an ankle tweak in practice, and we'll keep a close eye on that. So I wanted to also bring you guys an exchange I had with Kevin O'Connell, something I'm writing about, something I've been thinking about. I had a chance to talk to Blake Cashman, Josh Metellus, and Harrison Smith about it today, about whether the Vikings will use their big personnel more often. Josh Oliver, Johnny Munn, of course, is going to be in there a lot, but will they use him as a big dude? Will they use a little more blocking, a little more 2 tight end, a little more CJ Ham out of the I formation, and go a little more Kubiak style with the big personnel? And what I wanted to ask O'Connell was, since he has always been a 3 wide receiver type of scheme, or at least since he was in Los Angeles with the Rams, and then they used the 2 tight ends a little more last year, but that's where kind of his bones were made as an offensive coordinator, how he can adjust to the personnel when it might be better, as we're tying this into Jalen Nailor, it might be better to have Johnny Munt and Josh Oliver out there with Addison and Jefferson more than it is to have the 3 wide receivers all the time. Maybe that's only under certain circumstances, but they need to run the football better. They need to have Josh Oliver out there blocking and acting as a mismatch for linebackers and safeties because he's so big. I think there's an edge there, plus being just a little bit different. So many teams are in 11 personnel, and with three big dudes out there that you can use, CJ Ham and then Oliver and Munt. I think it gives the Vikings a different wrinkle this year that they have not really utilized in the last 2 years fully. So I wanted to bring you my back and forth, my question, and Kevin O'Connell's answer to those questions.
Kevin, when you were in Los Angeles, it was mostly 11 personnel.
Yep.
Now the personnel group here with the fullback, 2 tight ends who can play. I guess how much different is that from your standpoint of scheming and trying to use those players in different ways than you would from the 11 personnel?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's one I've thought about because I value so much the ability to have some personnel versatility on how you call a game. But yeah, we were so driven in that world. Sometimes just from a simple preparation standpoint, you get into the week in and week out of a season. If you've got to watch, multiple personnel groupings, that takes time away from honing in on maybe an extra detail in this grouping or that grouping. So it's really kind of just changed the way I go about the week. It changed the way as we've kind of evolved and tried to do some things with our run game, learning, different ways of not only doing that, but then how does that affect the pass game and the ability to marry it all up. So I think we're growing and have grown over the period of time that I've been here, and we've tried to be more versatile from a personnel standpoint. But it is something, especially as a play caller, you adjust to and try to figure out you're only going to get so many ops. You only get so many plays. You can have every play in the world you want on the call sheet, but in the end, you're going to get this many normal down, first and second down calls. You're going to get this many third downs. You're going to get this many red zone chances, and then your 2-minute. But those in total, normally average about 60 to 70 plays any given week, and you got to make sure your focus is not being slighted in any one area, especially as the play caller.
Last one.
Just to follow up, does that, for opponents, it seems like the league is mostly an 11 personnel league.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it causes defenses sort of more preparation that's different when they know that you can use different personnel than they're usually seeing?
Yeah, I think you just want to make sure if I'm doing it, they got to do it type of thing. And then they got to evaluate how we do things compared to maybe other teams they're more or less 21 or 12 or 13 or whatever it is. And then, if sometimes it's hard for us if they haven't seen, that's where you really see it. If they haven't seen a team that wants to play like that, you're searching for your clips and you're really trying to evaluate how things will carry over. And then there's no rule that says they got to play exactly the way they did on any one particular game or snap. So you got to be ready to evolve. You got to have a system where you can identify things. You got to have a system where all 11 guys, regardless of what the defense does, can have a clear-cut plan of how they want to play out each play. And then, where it goes from there is kind of an in-game fun side of it for me.
Football, everybody. I just thought that was an interesting way to lay it out for Kevin O'Connell about the cat and mouse game of even preparation between the two teams and the advantage that you can get when you're throwing something at the other team that their systems aren't really built for anymore. And I was talking to Blake Cashman about this, and he was saying, well, of course, we're going to be able to play whatever the other team throws at us. But when they got the big dudes out there, you got to be more aware of play action. You got to be certainly aware of somebody like Josh Oliver, who's going to be coming for the linebackers. And I don't think that defenses really love it when you're running out those big guys. If you can succeed, it's just that not too many people can actually succeed. So I wanted to bring you that commentary. I also just enjoy it when Kevin O'Connell's talking ball. I know that we have to, as reporters, get, what do you think of this guy? We have to get injury update, this news item. Did someone insult your defensive coordinator? Whatever it might be on a daily basis. But I think when Kevin O'Connell just talks football, that's when he's really at his absolute best. And I always learn something. So I enjoyed that back and forth. But let's now talk about the main subject here and get those questions in the comments as well, ready to go. But should they be favored against the New York Giants? I think 95% of you would say absolutely they should be favored. They're the New York Giants. And from their perspective, what I've been reading and talking to people who cover the Giants, I was just on a Giants podcast before this. It seems like they are very tentative to think that team's going to be good. A lot of it rests so much in the same way on the quarterback, like it does with the Vikings. And they're saying a lot of the same things that we're saying about Sam Darnold. Only the difference is that they're saying it about a rookie wide receiver in Malik Neighbors. Hey, you need Malik Neighbors to step up and be that guy when he's never played in the league before and just looked good in training camp. Their offensive line is better, but is it enough better to be able to block up the Vikings aside from Andrew Thomas, their really good left tackle? And on the defensive side, also a little bit of mirror image with the corners are a concern. They're bringing back Adoree Jackson. The Vikings, though, are bringing back someone who was much better last year in Stephon Gilmore. It may come down to whose star receiver can play better against who and which one can get a downfield shot, because I wouldn't completely dismiss Daniel Jones's ability to push it downfield if he finally has a receiver that he can do it. I think that this game sort of screams we have no real idea of what either team is going to look like entirely, and it feels like ugly to me, which means that it'll be a shootout for all times, and each quarterback will throw for 400 yards because we could just never really predict, especially in week one, but any week in the NFL. I think that the New York Giants, though, if you were going through just preseason, who you think are the sheer worst teams overall in the NFL, you probably would put the Giants up there. There's points in this roster that you just go, what do they really have there? The depth wide receivers, the running back is no longer Saquon Barkley. The offensive line is not impressive. The secondary is not impressive. Whereas the Vikings, I think, have more strengths in this game. The defensive linemen, outside linebackers, safeties, a deeper defense with talent, and assuming that Addison and Nailor are healthy, a deeper group of wide receivers as well. But both of these quarterbacks, their history, that's the thing that's going to most determine a line and where they're going to put it. And so the Vikings being favored is sort of a suggestion from bettors. Okay, we think Sam Darnold is going to clear the Daniel Jones line. We think Sam Darnold is going to be better than, at very least, Daniel Jones. Something else that came into my mind too was, when will the next time the Vikings are favored be? So they're favored here, not week 2, not week 3, probably not week 4 against the Jets. That really depends on what the Jets look like. Lions after that, Rams after that. It might be a long time until the Vikings are favored again, unless they play really good football through the start of the season. So enjoy it, I guess, while it lasts. But let me know, do you guys think that they should be favored? Do you look at them on a different tier as a team than the New York Giants? I would say that I do look at them as being farther along as a roster. Coaching, Brian Daboll, I respect as one of the good coaches in the league. I don't want to put him way up there. And of course, we would never crown anyone. He does have one playoff win against the Vikings, so you could say that. And I like the way that he coached that season. Last year was just a mess with their injuries and offensive line, but I do think that Brian Daboll is a good coach. They've changed defensive coordinators. That's going to be a lot different. A lot of moving parts here. These teams look very different than the last time we saw them in 2022, where it was a lot of the older group of Vikings. But now, how many players are even here from that 2022 matchup? Really not that many. Hockenson not playing, Harrison Smith, CJ Ham has been here forever. But aside from that, I mean, there are a lot of guys who have changed over. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, but even, Jordan Addison was just a rookie last season, so he's new. Aaron Jones is new. A lot of different faces for this team makes it a little bit less predictable than maybe it would have been even just last year if they had gone up against each other. So how do we feel about that? Should the Vikings be favored against the New York Giants? I think so, because of where the rosters stand, and also the fact that the Vikings are healthy and Sam Darnold had a good training camp. So even as much as I see it's become kind of a topic on a lot of podcasts, and it's got a little run on TV, and people are talking about, hey, could this Sam Darnold be good in Minnesota? None of us really know, but he's had all of training camp to prepare for this game. If there's one that he should be really ready for, they've had weeks now to put in this game plan and have everything locked in. This should be the one that, if he's going to perform well, and this has been a thing in his career, I think, where his first game of the year, his first couple games of the year have been pretty good, especially 2021 before the wheels came off. And I think that there is a good chance for the Vikings here. They should be the team that's favored. That I look at them going into this year, and maybe we could try to work this out of who we expect to be clearly in the playoffs. I'm going to try to work through this right now, and then I'll start answering questions. I didn't think of it through these terms until we started talking about it, but let's think about it in the way of, who do we expect to be locked into the playoffs, and then how many spots would be up for grabs? So as far as locked into the playoffs, I think Dallas is going to be there. So that's 1. Detroit, Green Bay, 3. I'm trying to decide Philly. I've been a little down on them, but they seem like kind of a lock. But we'll go with 3 right now. Someone from the NFC South has to make the playoffs. That's 4. Rams will be in. I think the 49ers will be in. So that might be 6. And then is it Philly? Is it the Vikings? Is it someone like Arizona or Seattle that we don't necessarily see coming? It might only be 1 or 2 spots that are up for grabs. But I think that the Vikings will be in the mix with those teams, with the teams vying for the 7th spot. I don't see the Giants that way, at least at this moment. If the Giants come out and play great and shock us all and make the playoffs, then whoops, then my prediction will be wrong. But looking at them on paper, they look more like a team that does win 6 or 7 games, whereas I think the Vikings can be in the mix for that 7th spot that 4 or 5 teams are going to battle for. And then it really depends on just how it plays out, whose quarterback stays healthy, what other things happen along the way, the schedules and all those things. Oh gosh, says, whoa, Dallas. I think Dallas is going to be great. They've been my pick all year because everybody is saying that they won't. And a lot of times the NFL has a way for teams that are good enough and have enough talent. The NFL has a way of eventually they break through. And Dallas, put all the drama aside, everybody's saying, well, they didn't do this, or this contract is still out there, and this will be the year that they do it because everybody said they couldn't. That's my logic. Is that great logic? I don't know. But I think they're going to be really good. I also, as much as Mike Zimmer runs his mouth to the Star Tribune and makes himself look bad, he's a really good coach on defense, and you guys know that. And that's, I think, where they needed an area of improvement was on the defensive side, because their offenses under Mike McCarthy have always been really good. If they get that, they should be a good team. Philly is the one I'm less sold on, because last year I was concerned about the coach and how he responded to some of the ways that defenses started to manage Jalen Hurts. So it might be Philly in the mix. San Francisco, I think, feels like a lock just because they always are, but is there regression there for Brock Purdy? They need one of these teams to be surprisingly bad in order to get into that conversation. So, well, you can let me know what you think as well. I just look at, if we're tiering out NFL teams. So at the very top tier, clearly the Detroit Lions are in the top tier of the NFC. San Francisco belongs there in the way most people look at it. So does, the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of these teams that have been good over multiple years in that top tier of NFC teams. The next section down is a team like the Rams, who made the playoffs last year. And I would put the Packers in the next section down, that I don't put them all the way at the top teams. They're in more of the mix of a team I could definitely see doing it, but also has some shortcomings. The Vikings are after that, the battling for wild card spots, and the Giants are after that, as in you could draft Shedeur Sanders. That's where I've got them right now, but that's the beauty of the National Football League, is that it'll all change coming up this weekend. So let's get the thoughts. Let's get the questions in here, and let's roll on for the next hour or so, answering some questions. And then I got some articles to write. Let's see. JP says, I don't know if we should be favored, but if we aren't favored against the Giants, who will we be favored against? That's a good point. The next time on the Vikings schedule that they could be favored, things are going to happen. If a quarterback gets hurt and you're playing someone's backup, then you're going to be favored if you've got your starter almost no matter what. But if we're just doing it on paper, just right now, maybe Chicago. People are naturally high on Chicago, but it's a rookie quarterback starting, and hard to say what types of ups and downs Caleb Williams will have in his first year. Home is always going to be an edge for the Vikings, but that's right. This is a team that so few people think is going to be any good, that just like with Dallas, it makes me think maybe they will be, just because of how wrong we are about football all the time. And that's why I did the research, and I looked at the teams that were expected to win 6.5 games last year, and half of them made the playoffs, and the other half were horrendous. Where are the Vikings going to fall into that? I tend to think, because of all the talent and the coaching, that they're more likely to slip into the playoffs than they are to be underneath that. But I mean, as far as how the standings play out, always as soon as they start playing, it all goes out the window. I shot you 99 says there's going to be a lot of nerves from Vikings fans on Sunday regarding how well or bad that Darnold is going to play. What can you say to help calm those nerves? I can't give you much of a pep talk. I mean, for me, covering this team, showing up at the stadium every Sunday, I always showed up with the thought, I have no idea what's going to happen, and that's why I love this job. And everything under the sun happened over the years. Games that I never would have expected them to win. I mean, 2019 going to New Orleans, I was absolutely certain this team is a mess right now. The coach thinks he's getting fired. The coach and the quarterback aren't getting along. It's Drew Brees. The Saints have been great this year. It's going to be Superdome, home field advantage. And the Vikings won the game. There's been other times, and I'm sure you guys can name a few, where I was absolutely sure that they were going to win the game. 2018 Buffalo, when they were favored by, 18 points or something. The only thing I could say about the Sam Darnold bit, which is what you're asking about, is that if he had looked bad in training camp, then I would say, I got nothing for you, pray. But he did not look bad in training camp. In fact, I would say that overall, he had about as good of a training camp as I ever could have expected. That on a day-to-day basis, there were some bad days mixed in, but on a day-to-day basis, Darnold was hitting deep shots to Justin Jefferson. He was finding guys. He was rolling out of the pocket and making plays. And in that preseason game, it was a reflection of what he's looked like, which is he made some really nice throws. And I think that he can carry that over at least to some extent, which is not to say that I think he could throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns on a week in and week out basis. But sometimes when we talk about Darnold, we talk about him as if he has just always been horrendous in every game he's ever played in. But when you look at his game logs, this is a fun thing to do. I mean, if you're here watching this show, then you think that this is fun. To go to Pro Football Reference and just sort under game logs, all the games that Darnold has had, and look at the ones that are good and look at the ones that are bad. And it will blow your mind, because the great games he's had would make you think that he was a superstar. And then the bad games, there's one where he has a 2.8 quarterback rating. I didn't even know you could have a quarterback rating of 2.8, but he went 5 for 15 with 2 picks, and both picks were really bad. But then there's another game, and because now I'm searching Sam Darnold a lot on Google searches, now I'm getting it showing up in the YouTube algorithm all the time. And it's like, look at Sam Darnold's 320-yard game for the Panthers. Like, when did he do that? And you watch the highlights and go, man, whoa. And so I think with the Vikings, what it's really about is you're going to get some really good games from him. It's about curtailing the awful games and making them closer to average games, because with Flores' defense, you could survive average games, but you can't survive games where, actually, I think they hilariously won the game. He had a 2 anti-QB win. People really look at that game because I think it was a defensive battle and they turned the ball over or something, but you know what I mean? You're not going to win very often when your quarterback rating is below 100, 90, 60, whatever number is the line of demarcation there. Maybe it's 85. You probably lose most of your games if your rating is below. Keeping the awful games out is the biggest thing. So are you going to be nervous every week that the really bad version of Darnold is going to show up? Absolutely. Absolutely, you will be. And there's nothing I can do about that until he proves otherwise. But I can tell you that he had a really good camp and he has chemistry with Jefferson. And that's a really good start for having a decent season. Daniel says, where is the Cam Bynum extension? 11-6. All right. Daniel, very high on the idea of Sam Darnold thriving. As far as Cam Bynum, I think it's okay if they let it play out with him. It's not like they have to do that right now. They'll have the ability to negotiate with him after the season, before he hits free agency. They'll have some time there. After they win the Super Bowl in February, you've still got 6 weeks to sign him to a new contract. They can do it then and decide, do they want to move Theo Jackson into that spot? Do they think that Harrison Smith's going to stay around for another year? Do they want to keep him? What are their other options? How did he perform for this year? So it doesn't have to be done now. I think Bynum's been a great fit, and that safety unit is phenomenal. So if they did it tomorrow, okay, that's fine to get him locked in. But he also might want to see how he plays as well, and then see what the market might ask, because the Vikings do have more safeties. I mean, they could lose 2 safeties and still have a really good starting unit. If it was Theo Jackson and Josh Metellus, there might be funds that they want to put into maybe a defensive tackle, maybe a corner in free agency instead of Bynum. But he has been a really good fit with Brian Flores. I think it's okay if they play that one out. Mike says, I think that the Vikings should be favored. I'm excited to see the franchise headed in the right direction, top to bottom. Yeah, this is something that we talk about all the time with you guys and with other friends of mine who are Vikings fans and other reporters. It's kind of a main discussion is, the franchise overall, I think everybody has the same feeling about it, which is the next couple of years that there will be opportunities there to build something that could be very good, to where we're going into a lot of games talking about, hey, the Vikings are favored by X number of points. But this year exists in this world between tearing it down last year and just hoping to be competitive versus next year putting a bunch of money into it and trying to go to the moon with that group around JJ McCarthy. And then there's 2024 just sitting here. Kind of reminds me, well, now that they're going to play the Giants, you almost think about like a 1997, if you're very old, how it was right before 98. The team had a ton of talent, but it wasn't quite there yet. This happened a couple of years in the 2000s as well, maybe a Gus Frerotte. Tavares Jackson didn't quite make it, but you had someone like Frerotte where even the team around him wasn't quite there, but it had a lot of talent. And then when Favre got there, all the things came together in 2009. So what is this season? How are you supposed to feel about it? And I guess what I've come to is, let's just see what happens. I was trying with Brian Murphy to come up with a tagline for this year. What can we call it? Let's just see what happens is probably the tagline that I could come up with, because it could surprise us. It could horrify us. It could bore us to death potentially if they are a win one, lose one type of team. We could see players emerge. We could see players not play as well as we think. I don't know, but it's all going to mean something. It's all going to mean something to the greater, bigger picture. And if they do surprise you, it could be a very fun year. I think that I brought this up with someone, now I can't even remember who, that one of the things that's happened in sports, which is a little unfortunate versus when I was growing up, or even maybe until the internet and social media got big, was, and look, as far as approaches from front offices go, I am 100% in. If you're not first, you're last. The Ricky Bobby approach. If you're not first, you're last. This is why you should do everything with your eye on championships. That's how I think of team building. Try to win championships. Don't try to be average. We've been through that. It's not great. But we used to, I think, go into NFL seasons, NBA, where if your team didn't win the championship, I'm not saying it was fine. It still hurts at the end for whatever team you're rooting for. But everything is, and this goes for Lamar Jackson, it goes for Josh Allen. Well, they haven't won a Super Bowl, so they're just not good enough for the way it's viewed for a lot of people. And I think with this season, we kind of have to throw it back a little bit to maybe how you used to watch football with the Vikings, where let's just see if they have a good season. And we'll go week to week. And it's always a roller coaster with this team. And we'll just have to find out what happens, because it's hard to tell you right now that, oh yeah, they could be in the Super Bowl. That would be really excessive for where they're at. But also, I don't think that they could be bad. And the middle has a lot of potential outcomes. And that is why they play the games. Mike says, surprise story for this Sunday. Will Reichard's performance wins us the game. I am interested to see Will Reichard. Now, on the list of all things I'm intrigued by, it didn't make it that high, but Will Reichard, kicker of the future, starts now, I suppose. And I was on this Giants podcast that I was on. They were saying that the Giants had some record for most game-winning field goals against them of over 50 yards. I thought, who was the person that came up with that statistic? But if you want anything to hang on to for your prediction, maybe that is it. Bad Bo says the Giants may be the worst team in the NFL. So yes, the Vikings will win. They very well might be. I was looking at their depth chart earlier, and I do feel that they have enough talent to be dangerous because of their defensive line and because of Malik Neighbors. But if you start talking about too many other people, Andrew Thomas is good. It's a little dicey. Deonte Banks, their corner, he'll be facing Justin Jefferson, I think, a lot. That's something to watch. But there's a lot of gaps there where it's players that you aren't afraid of. And that team with their quarterback, if Daniel Jones plays anything like he did last year, then yeah, they could be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And if we were doing this, I wonder who's going to be the worst team in the NFL is a great question. Who could be worse than the Giants? Any team with a rookie quarterback, probably not the Bears, but maybe. Washington absolutely could be if Jaden Daniels isn't very good out of the gate. Let's see. I guess I was thinking about Tampa Bay having this big regression, but I don't know. They seem like an average team to me. This is a hard question. Who could be the worst team in the NFL? It's usually someone who gets their quarterback hurt. That's what makes it difficult. But if we're doing this right now, I would be surprised if a Jim Harbaugh team was that bad, but the Chargers are a little short on talent. And if Justin Herbert's foot injury is a problem, that could be pretty rough. The Titans, if Will Levis is not good, could be very bad. The Patriots are probably the favorite to be the worst team in the league. And then the Giants. So you're right. You're not going over the top by saying that they are in that mix of 5 or 6 teams that might be the worst in the entire NFL on paper right now today. Andrew says Sam Darnold, 270 and 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. Our center has problems with protection, has to make some on-the-run highlight reel throws, win by 17. It'd be an ideal start for the Vikings. It would, if that's the way that it played out. I think that not just the center, the guards as well, everyone's going to have a problem with Dexter Lawrence. But one thing to remember from the game in 2022 was that Kirk Cousins had big numbers in that game, and the offense scored points, even despite the fact that Dexter Lawrence was crushing them. And Kayvon Thibodeau has been good, and Brian Burns is one of the best players in the league at his position, but the Vikings have been able to not totally negate, but limit the impact of a lot of edge rushers over the years because of their tackles. Can you stop this one man? And he's a hard man to stop, Dexter Lawrence. That might be a factor. Well, no, that will be a factor for how this plays out. But you bring up a point that if it was 4th and 8 and Sam Darnold got pressure up the middle, his ability to scramble and throw on the move and make a playoff schedule is different than Kirk Cousins. It's just his ability also to read the middle of the field, to avoid trying to fit something into a window that isn't there. That's where he's a lot worse than Kirk Cousins, and why Cousins has been a better quarterback throughout his career. So can he do that? Because if you're hanging on to the ball, you're not getting it out, or you're taking some risks because you're under pressure. That's been Sam Darnold's history when things have gone wrong for him. I think this is Kua. Do you think Addison is going to play this weekend? When do you think the suspension is going to hit? So I do think that Jordan Addison is going to play this weekend. That's just based on him being out there practice today on a limited basis, and what Kevin O'Connell said about him. He seemed positive about his chances to play. They talked about getting him ramped up going into the later parts of the week. We'll have to see if he practices. I'll be out there tomorrow, Friday, injury reports. We'll just have to wait on that, but it sounds like he's going to play. As far as the suspension goes, I don't know how quickly the wheels of justice are going to turn. As of this moment, it feels to me like he is not going to be suspended until next year. You might rather have him suspended this year. I don't know, depending on how things end up playing out. But his first court date is set for October, but I don't think that's going to be his last court date. I think that's where he has to put in a plea. So he'll send his lawyer out there. I think he's going to be in London during this time or coming back from London. So he'll send his lawyer out there. They'll put in a plea, and then I would assume they get another court date if they're trying to drag this out a little bit more, or he could just plead guilty and try to plea it down or something and go from there. I mean, there's options here that it's just difficult to know. It could be later on this year or the beginning of next year, but with Roger Goodell, there's not really been rhyme or reason to the suspensions. Reconnected says, do you think the Vikings can win this game by more than one score? The Vikings? More than one score? When would that happen? Hey, that's a good point, though, because in the recent past, I just prepared myself for every week that I was going to be gripping the edge of the chair in the press box, leaning forward. The noise is going to be ramped up. One score game. All right, let's see how this plays out at the end and all that. I don't know that there's always going to be the same type of tension with this. There might be blowouts where Darnold is awesome and blowouts where he doesn't play well. And it's a little bit wider of score differentials than we've seen in the past, because it is unbelievable how many one-score games they played. Or maybe Will Reichard will be so good that they'll win all of them again and go 13-4. I don't know. But can they win this by more than one score? I have enough respect for what the Giants defensive line can do to this team that I don't think that they're going to run over them. But this is one that they should win. They should come out of New York with a win. And if they don't, then we're going to really be talking about yikes, right? Because we know what's coming up after that. So should they be favored? I think so. Do they need this? Oh my gosh. Yes, they need this so badly. And that may play into it a little bit, that they know there's a desperation even in week one to get this win for the Vikings, because if they don't, it's a problem. Oh gosh says preseason wide receiver depth looked good, but one guy gets injured and now we're freaking out. Couldn't we just bring in one of the guys on our squad? Were you freaking out? Who was freaking out? I wasn't freaking out. And I don't think that Nailor's going to miss the game because he was limited. We'll have to see, but I'm not freaking out. I think that a lot of the depth receivers are similar in talent. None of them are a superstar, but all of them have different things that they do well. That Trent Sherfield does certain things well. He's a good blocker. He's good with the ball in his hands. Brandon Powell can run some routes and get open and is a yards after catch guy. Tristan Jackson, we've seen down the field as more of a deep receiver if he needs to be, and they will use the two tight ends. So there's no reason to freak out. You only freak out if it's Jefferson or Addison, then freak out. Because if someone has to slide into Addison's role, I like their depth, but no one is him. He's a first-round pick for a reason, because he has a special skill set. And, of course, no one is Justin Jefferson. If it's Jalen Nailor, that you can work around. If it's Addison or Jefferson, it's much, much harder. Eric says, as much as Darnold is talked about, I think the season hinges on Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. Better they run the ball, less chance that Darnold does something crazy, especially on 3rd and long. And this is a great point, Eric, because I think about how sometimes the simplest concepts of football, the most old school, well-established in the late 60s of National Football League, still apply today. And if you can run the football even somewhat effectively, then it just causes problems for the opponent and it makes life a little easier on your quarterback. But your point about 3rd and long is exactly right. When you look at the numbers where Darnold made most of his mistakes and where he was a well below average quarterback was on 2nd and 3rd and long. But if it was 2nd and manageable, or if it was 1st and 10 or less than that, whatever, a penalty or something, he was a fine quarterback. And a lot of times with Darnold's data, what I have found so interesting is that you can put it into these buckets of when he's under these circumstances, he's an average quarterback. And when he's in those circumstances, he's a terrible quarterback. And it's all the ones that you're talking about. It's the 3rd and longs where he's pressing. It's when he's losing. It's when he can't use play actions and screens effectively. It's when the offensive line has to just sit back there and pass protect and hope that the other team doesn't have Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau, right? So avoiding those 3rd and longs is a really big key part of this offense this year, in ways where last 2 years, they could just keep throwing with Kirk Cousins, but you really can't do that now. Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler, if we went off what they did last year and they just did it again, would be a pretty good running duo if they average 4.5 yards a carry, and you can use that and then look for explosives down the field. But if they struggle or if they're banged up, I mean, respect to Myles Gaskin for winning a job, but if you get to the point where you're playing Myles Gaskin, then it's going to be a lot on Sam Darnold's play. I think that's going to be hard. Expose says, am I crazy to think that if we get a good quarterback play if we get good quarterback play, we can compete? I see a lot of people picking the Giants over us. Well, I mean, that goes for the entire season. And that's what makes this so tricky to talk about. Should they be favored in this game? Could they be in the playoffs? All those things, because so much of it does rest on exactly what you're talking about. If it's even good quarterback play, then the answer is they can play with anybody. With the coaching that they have, the players on defense, the receivers. If you go toe-to-toe with almost any team, not saying Detroit, but almost any team, roster for roster, if you went through the Packers roster, if you went through the Rams roster, you could find this many stars, this many guys that are drivers of success. But the difference is that the Rams have Matthew Stafford and you have Sam Darnold. And you need Sam Darnold to play like some version of Matthew Stafford to get that kind of season. The fact that we've had recent examples of it makes it more possible. The fact that there's been a Geno Smith and a Baker Mayfield under similar circumstances with multiple good receivers and good coaching makes it possible. They could play with just about anybody on a weekly basis if that's the case. They could certainly beat the Giants if that's the case. And if it's not, and when your whole season rests on a guy who just hasn't really done it before, that's what we were talking about earlier, about the nervousness. Like, tell me not to be nervous. I can't do that. Other than to say, let's just see what happens. But that's the best I got. I can't tell you not to be nervous. Bad Bo says running back depth is terrifying. If Jones gets hurt, we're over. Yeah, I don't know how many teams have 3 or 4 good running backs, so there is that. But Jones is a massive part of this. If Jones, what does he need to do to feel like they made the playoffs? That's an interesting question. Give me that in the comment section too. What would Jones's stat line have to be for you to say, okay, if he does that, they're in the playoffs? I would go with if he has 975 yards at 4.6 yards per carry and 45 receptions, there's a pretty decent chance that they were in the playoff race. If he ends up with 500 yards because he got banged up, then they're not. And if he's over 1,000, there's a really good chance that they're there because of the man's skill. He can drive an offense and probably doesn't give enough credit for what he did last year at the end of the season with Jordan Love. I don't think it was a total coincidence that Love's success and his played off each other. And also, when Aaron Rodgers was not quite on the same level, 2022, Aaron Jones was there in the backfield playing extremely well and keeping them in the playoff race when Aaron Rodgers wasn't playing his best football. He does have the capability to do that. This is a unique back that you put in that same category as Dalvin Cook when he was good, could keep you in the race by being Dalvin Cook and be an outlet for the quarterback and get explosive plays where there wasn't any to be had. That's what they really, really missed last year, is someone like Alexander Mattison just couldn't break off a big run. Every explosive play had to be Kirk Cousins throwing it down the field. It didn't even feel like they got any screens that created big plays. In 2022, as much as Dalvin Cook struggled down the stretch and it was very clear it was over, the early middle part of the season, he did have a lot of those. And what really sparked the Buffalo comeback was a Dalvin Cook explosive run. Remember those? We haven't seen them since then, really. But those explosive runs are enormous for whether an offense can exist or can succeed. I mean, Aaron Jones is a big part of that, but I wouldn't count out Ty Chandler's ability to run. What was his 30-yard run was his longest for last year. He had a couple of those pitch plays, and I like Ty Chandler on the edge because he's so quick, and that's where some of your good blockers are. That's Josh Oliver. That's Brian O'Neill. On the other side, Christian Darrisaw. Getting to the outside with Ty Chandler can be pretty nasty for opponents. Those two playing off each other could drive an offense. And I think if you're Kevin O'Connell and you could stick with that and that happens, then life becomes so much easier. It's not just on Darnold, but it's also on O'Connell. It's a lot easier to have a menu of plays to call on 2nd and 4 than it is to call on 2nd and 12. And that just killed them last year. How many drives were dead on arrival, handoff -2, and this goes for the blocking as well, but handoff -2. All right, well, now you're going to have to create a big passing play in order to get something going. It all kind of does start there. Bad Bo says Flores is going to blitz Jones and he will have to run. Yeah, I don't know the best way to approach Daniel Jones, but I know it's not what Ed Donatel did. I think it is probably blitzing. I haven't looked up the data on this about Jones and how he deals with blitzes throughout his career, but what I would be thinking if I was Brian Flores is this guy's had some injuries in recent years, and I'm guessing he doesn't want to have more. So if you blitz him and give him a lot of pressure and just get into his head a little bit early on, he may play it very safe after that if you could get a few hits on him, because he has had all these injuries in recent years, or last year especially. Rob says, as long as we don't let Jones run for 1 million first downs. This is something that I want to see. Is Jones going to be the same kind of runner? Because he had a neck injury, an ACL injury, I think. I mean, he's been banged up. Is he going to run the same way that he did in 2022? Because that was hard for the Vikings to face, and it'll be a little easier now that you have a better situation at linebacker, clearly to me, with Pace and Blake Cashman, as opposed to Hicks and where Kendricks was at that time. And you have Metellus. You have different players that I think would be better at it, but my gosh, he was able to make some serious plays with his legs. Is he going to be able to do that again against them? Or is he going to be a little more hesitant? That's a factor here. Is he going to play like a guy who had confidence as he did in 2022, or like somebody who's coming off an injury? Sloth said the Vikings should win this game, but you don't have to worry that Dexter blows it up. Last year probably should have beat the Bucks. And if I recall, Vita Vea made a couple of pivotal plays. Yeah. You have to worry, right? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do have to worry, not don't have to worry. You do have to worry. Absolutely. And this is what having a great defensive line is. I tend to think over the aggregate of an entire season that coverage is going to be more dictating of what your defense is, because if you can't cover anyone, you're kind of screwed, right? And you're not going to get pressure every play. If you get pressure 40% of the time, that's still 6 plays where the quarterback can sit back there. But one guy can blow up a game in the league. And when you go through games that you don't expect the results, upsets, go, what happened? Why did that team lose? Sometimes a total meltdown. A lot of times, one dude had a strip sack. One dude had 7 or 9 pressures, and the quarterback threw some interceptions. Players blowing up games has just been a thing against the Vikings. I mean, Jaron Hall struggled last year in that game against the Packers, and so did Nick Mullins. But Kenny Clark ate them alive, and that's always the guy I'll go to. But Grady Jarrett did this to them. What was that, 2020, the year they lost to Atlanta? I think Grady Jarrett had a bunch of pressures in that game. One dude, especially on the interior, and was it O'Connell or Wes Phillips? No, Wes Phillips was talking about this yesterday, about how interior pressure is harder to deal with because it's harder to chip, and it happens so fast, and no quarterback likes that guy in your face. I talked to Nick Mullins about this last year, and what he said was, with the guys coming off the edges, as dangerous and scary as they can be, you can step up away from them where you can't step up. I mean, that's the natural place you're throwing the ball, right? Is stepping up into a throw. But if you're facing interior pressure, that means you got to go outside to make that play. And if they have good edge rushers, or even if your quarterback just isn't comfortable with that, he could blow up this game 100%. If there's a way, if there's a path that they were to lose, it's that he ends up blowing up the game. Okay, let me, gonna have to do some ad reads soon. No one has reminded me of this yet. Let's see. Digital Plains Media says, what are your 3 keys to victory? Oh, keys to victory. Now, I'll definitely go over this more with Andrew Kramer and Will Raggets. We're going to be doing the roundtable again from TCO Performance Center. So we'll record that tomorrow and bring that to you guys on Friday night here, because tomorrow night we'll be back with Manny for another podcast, really looking deep into all the games in the week 1 slate. And of course, this one. But as far as just 3 keys to victory, I mean, I think we just said one of them, which is at least limit Dexter Lawrence from destroying everything in his path. Get Aaron Jones going early on in the game, frustrate them, and then it's about hitting on big plays. I don't think that you can dink and dunk your way with this team, 12-play drive with this team. You could do it with Kirk, but I don't think that you can do it with Sam Darnold. Let's see. Kerpluppy says, Zimmer interim coach by week 12. Write that down. Yeah. A lot of you think Dallas is going to be terrible, and that might be the case, but there haven't been too many Dak Prescott teams that have been terrible, and Mike McCarthy teams have been really good. They're so dislikable. Yeah, that's the right word. That it's easy to forget they outscored their opponents by 194 last year, which was number 2 in the league only to the Baltimore Ravens. That's why I think they'll be good, is because just with Dak and Mike McCarthy, they've put up huge numbers. They've outscored their opponents. They've got tons of talent. They're just obnoxious. Horn fan says, I don't think their run game will be good with Zeke and Cook. I don't either. I also don't know at this point how much the run game for them dictates a lot. It did earlier in Dak's career, but now they just throw it. They just throw it all the time, and it works for them. Cole says, how does one stop Dexter Lawrence from wrecking it all? I've mentioned praying. That might be one thing. What I think it is the key is to be able to have one-on-ones on the edges. That's what I think the key is with Dexter Lawrence, because if you don't let Brian Burns beat you, if you're one-on-one and you don't let Brian O'Neill get beaten by Kayvon Thibodeau, then you can at least give extra help on the interior wherever Dexter Lawrence is. And I think of the extra help as being Garrett Bradbury, and he might line up directly over Bradbury sometimes, but if he's to the left or to the right of Bradbury, then you can give extra help to Ed Ingram. You can give extra help to Blake Brandel, and then you're relying on the running back to be paying attention, because they run stuff behind that. They'll run blitzes behind that or stunts behind that, where you're having Thibodeau or Burns come inside against, maybe Lawrence going outside, and it causes all sorts of problems. This offensive line's been together for a long time. If they can't communicate with that stuff, then you're just in trouble. But with their offensive line coach being the same, their head coach being the same, all the players have been here multiple years. They should be able to do it at this point. If they can't, it's going to be a problem. But that would be the plan, is to give help on the interior for those blitzes and stunts with the running back, and then try to have one-on-ones on the outside and see if that works. Oh gosh says, my sneaky NFC team is New Orleans. Like, they could be anywhere from 11-6 to 6-11. I don't know who that team is anymore. You're right about that. That bad could very much be in the cards for New Orleans. I mean, we kind of think of them as, because you have Derek Carr, 8 wins is what you're going to end up being, but they've got a situation there that is with Derek Carr and the injuries that he's had, and then the supporting cast with the offensive line that he has. It doesn't look great for Derek Carr staying healthy for the entire season. I don't know who their backup quarterback is, but it's never a good scene if you end up with that backup quarterback playing. How many times did Carr get banged up in games last year? The ceiling might not be super high for that team either. They've had good defenses in the past, but they've gotten older on defense. They're a team that I just don't think about at all. I think about them as so stuck in the middle. They are the team that you look at and you go, whew, good thing the Vikings moved on from Kirk Cousins. And Kirk might have a very good year this year. And if he does in Atlanta, well, that's a team that picks up a guy like Kirk because they're ready to win. Although Kyle Pitts hamstring, everybody talking about Kyle Pitts taking a big step with Kirk. I don't know. But New Orleans, where are they? 2021 Viking land, 2020 Viking land, just a team stuck in the middle. You would much rather be in this spot having a let's see what happens season and on to the future than needing to win now with a team you can't win now with. Kerpluppy, I think the Vikings are getting grossly underrated because of Sam Darnold. That is causing everyone to forget about the overhaul of our defense. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The defense is a lot better. I wrote about that yesterday. PurpleInsider.com to go check out these articles that I reference. I wrote about that yesterday, though, that Brian Flores has a lot more tools in the bag that he is able to go to now. Even the depth along the defensive line, the guys who made the team behind the starters, they had to really earn it in training camp. And someone like Jerry Tillery brings at least a little more depth to that group. At corner, your backups are Caleb Evans and Fabian Morrow. Caleb Evans was starting the whole season last year, and now he's CB5. I mean, that's an upgrade, even if it's not the unit that you would have the most confidence in. And where the biggest upgrade is, I think, is in the outside linebackers. No Danielle Hunter, but instead it's three guys, and Jihad Ward is an interesting one as well, who could have a chance to be pretty good. So that you're right, that defense is quite a bit better. And I think the reality of this team is that in the past with Kevin O'Connell, the passing game was going to win the game. If the Vikings won, the passing game made them win. Not really the defense most of the time, except for 3-0, but not really the defense, not really the running game. Those things, if they worked out, that was great. This is a shift. So now it's, if you won the game, if you tell me, well, hey, they beat the Texans, I probably wouldn't say, oh yeah, well, Sam Darnold probably just dominated them, right? I would probably say, I bet they turned the ball over a couple times, right? In a good way. They got a couple turnovers. I would probably say, oh, that means Aaron Jones must have gone off, because they are going to have to rely on these other parts. That means Will Reichard went 6 for 6 and field goals. There's just going to have to be a little bit more. Up North says, honest question, shouldn't Darnold look great in training camp? Well, I mean, starting quarterback in the league who has Justin Jefferson to throw to, yes. Starting quarterbacks should look good in training camp. But if he didn't, then I would be a lot more concerned. I think that's the point. I don't think you watch him succeed in training camp and say, folks, we got ourselves an MVP here. But you do say, all right, this looks like a guy who can run this offense. He looks like a guy who has a tremendous arm and can push the ball to Justin Jefferson. It doesn't guarantee anything because pressure is the problem, and there's no pressure during training camp. So we're watching a lot of clean reps, not all of them, but most of them. And he can't be sacked and he can't be hurt or anything like that, like he could be in the real games. But you're more looking for, I've always thought this about camp. It's not about the things that necessarily look good outside of JJ McCarthy. Well, that mattered a lot because he's a rookie and you just drafted him. But all right, Justin Jefferson looks good. Jonathan Grenard looks good. Of course, it's really about the bad things that show up in camp. And for Darnold, I didn't think there were that many bad things that showed up that made me think, oh man, this is going to be rough. He was running the offense. He was getting the ball out, which I thought was a positive. Struggled in those joint practices against Cleveland, probably the top 3 defense in the league. But yeah, I mean, that's all we can really do with training camp evaluations is just say, well, it didn't look bad. So I'm not going into the season going, they're screwed, but it also isn't some sort of guarantee that it's going to be great. The high end of it is very much to be determined by a lot of factors. Oh gosh says, can Dallas Turner cover? Not that I want him doing that, but I know they tried doing that with Hunter, and I'm wondering, they didn't actually do it much with Hunter. It was just that every time they did, a million people pointed out on the internet, why are they dropping Hunter back? I think the numbers were maybe 2 snaps a game or something like that. It wasn't very often. Turner is a guy who can drop back. Yes, he did it at Alabama, and he's much different than Danielle Hunter. I think Dallas Turner could play inside linebacker with his speed and with his flexibility. He could play safety. I mean, he's really that good of an athlete. Someone will have to look this up. Did Dallas Turner play basketball? He just has this really smooth nature about him that you think he could cover somebody one-on-one. He actually catches the ball nicely when they throw it to him. They do this drill where they have the guy drop back and he has to catch balls. And sometimes it looks really bad for the defensive lineman, as you'd expect. But for him, he just grabs it, catches it, nice and smooth. So I think he actually could be an asset there. We know Van Ginkel's great at it. Van Ginkel has been a really successful cover linebacker in the past. It just gives them more options. That's what I think of this year. It's not that they have insanely more talent, that they're the Bears from a couple years ago, from 2018, or the 2017 Vikings. It's just that there's more there to do, or to lean on, to use for Brian Flores than there was before. Angel Dust says over under 10 sacks for JG this season. I will go under, but not by a ton. I think Jonathan Grenard will end up with something like 8.5 sacks, and it will be more distributed to the other guys than it was for Danielle Hunter last year. But I was looking back at, I think it was maybe 2020 or 2021 for Flores. Must have been 2020, where they were up toward the top of the league in sacks, I believe. And I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head, but they were top 10 in sacks without a single guy with double digits. And that I could see happening at some point. Okay, actually, let me get to ad reads, and then we'll continue on the conversation. Really, really good stuff from you guys today. Just one for this evening. US Cellular noticed that the way that we use our phones has gotten ironic. We try to put our phones down for dinner, but the menu is on a QR code. That is ironic. We hit like on social media posts that we don't actually like. Also ironic, which is why US Cellular created Us Mode to help us reconnect with each other and use our phones less ironically. A phone company wanting people to use their phones less. Ironic. Let's find us again with Us Mode by US Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built for us to get started. And a reminder that this show presented by Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code PURPLE to claim your special pick and first time offer up to 1,000 bonus cash. And a reminder as well that if a certain number of you use that promo code PURPLE over at Underdog Fantasy, helps the show. I get that question all the time. How can I help the show? 2 ways. Sign up for that newsletter at purpleinsider.com, or use that promo code over at Underdog Fantasy. That helps me. Okay. Let's see. That's funny. Wildfires podcast says, I'm quoting you on that. Vikings will win the Super Bowl in February. If they're going to win it, we all agree on this, right? If they're going to win the Super Bowl someday, it will be in a season that we go into saying there's no chance they win the Super Bowl. There's no way they're going to win the Super Bowl when they're favorites. If they rebuild this team perfectly, it's only going to be in a season that we never expect. So there you go. Quote me on it. Super Bowl Vikings. Sean says, I don't get why everyone is dead set on giving Cam Bynum an extension. He's been good, but isn't top tier. The money could go to a position that isn't as strong as our safety room. Yeah, I think that Bynum has been a really good fit, and that safeties aren't that expensive. That could be another part of it. If you got a reasonable deal for Bynum, Flores wants to keep Josh Metellus in that role. Harrison Smith maybe retires and you put in Theo Jackson. You still feel like that's a strength. If you lose Bynum and then you have to make Metellus more of a traditional safety, you might not feel as strong about that. And if you're replacing him, you don't know how the other person is going to take that spot. Right? Whoever you have replace him, it's a lot less predictable than it would be otherwise if you decide to keep him. But you're right. I mean, they're going to have a lot of money to spend. And where are they going to spend it? Are they going to spend some of it on a safety position? Also, at some point, too, with Josh Metellus, they might have to redo that deal. They extended him, and that was great. But if he plays well again, they're going to have to look at that contract. And when guys play well, they get paid more money. I still think that no matter what, they're going to have a lot of money to spend. And if you put some of it into continuity on your defense, that's still money well spent. That won't keep you from a defensive tackle. It won't keep you from a corner. It won't keep you from maybe replacing Aaron Jones with another running back or a guard that you guys have wanted so desperately for so long. Although Sam Cosmi getting, what was it, 17 mil a year? Guards are getting expensive. Kerpluppy, is there any valid concern to the fact that we signed so many to one-year deals, particularly on defense? What happens if we ball out this year and everyone wants money? Well, let's think about that. How many guys are on one-year contracts? So Jerry Tillery, I think, is. Harrison Phillips is in the last year of his deal. So that's 2. You got Grenard and Van Ginkel were multiple-year deals, and so is Blake Cashman. Ivan Pace is on a multi-year contract. Metellus is locked in. And the cornerbacks, though, that's where it's going to be up in the air. They're going to have to spend money at the cornerback position. Gilmore is a one-year deal. So is Fabian Morrow. And Byron Murphy is a free agent after this. And then you mentioned Cam Bynum. So there will be things that they have to do there at the cornerback position. At defensive tackle, they'll have to make some decisions there. But if we look at the guys who are under contract, it is a lot of foundational pieces. The outside linebackers, Cashman and Pace, so that unit's all set. Metellus, that's in good shape. Theo Jackson, that's in good shape. There's a lot to work with, but that's how it always goes with it always goes this way with defenses where you're dealing with a little guys coming in and out. It will be harder if they ball out to pay everybody. But the way that they've set up the salary cap, there's space. And also too, once you get into, hey, we're trying to win now, and we have, maybe they'll look at it this way. JJ McCarthy, after this year, will have 4 years of that rookie contract, including the 5th-year option. But look at it as maybe 3 clean, super cheap years. In those 3 years, you can spend like crazy and push it down the road and restructure and do everything you need to do. So if you want to keep Phillips and you want to keep Bynum and you're overpaying a little bit for them, okay, fine. Because you're going to do whatever you can in that winning window cap-wise to push money down the road. And if it doesn't work, you're pushing it into the next GM, which is what happened to Rick Spielman. Pushed it into the next GM. And that's why, really, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said he felt like he was down 33-0. I think it was the salary cap. Was a major part of that. Son of a Beaver says Panthers hands down for the worst team in the league. If Bryce Young plays like he did last year, then they could very well be. They did put a lot into that team, though. Go look at that offensive line from last year to this year. Big gains there. Deontay Johnson's a great wide receiver who was playing with really bad quarterbacks. They have a better coach. I think they're going to be a classic team that takes that middle step forward. They end up with 7 wins, 6 wins, but I'm not sure they'll be catastrophically bad unless something goes horrible with Bryce Young. Up north says Giants, Vikings, Panthers, Saints, Titans for your worst teams in the league. So you're not buying into this team, eh? You think this is a battle for the worst team in the league? Okay. Saints, I could see. Titans. If Will Levis is bad, Titans could definitely be there. New England is the lock. How about the Raiders? Nobody mentioned, including me, the Raiders. But, excuse me, the Raiders, I mean, you're talking about running out Gardner Minshew with a coach who's in his second year that brought a lot of energy to them, and they played defense pretty well in Vegas. But also, if you're the worst passing team or one of the worst passing teams in the league, you could absolutely be in that conversation, and they're in a tough division. They might be there as well. Joe says, I personally think the Vikings are going to blow out the Giants, get some respect on our name early. They could use it. This is one where if you think about how differently things play out if they win versus if they lose, kind of blows your mind. Because if they win the game and they can even win one of the next 3, it's 3 hard opponents, but can you win one out of the next 3? 2-2, going to London. against a Jets team that we'll see what they look like. We'll see what Rodgers looks like. I don't know if that team's going to be mediocre, good, or very good. They'll have a good defense, but you're playing in London. It's kind of weird over there. Lions and Rams come up after that. But getting that one victory, this reminds me of the discussion from last year where losing the Bucs game, we all said, oh no, because then your schedule gets so much harder right after that. And that's exactly what happened. They ended up getting, 1-4 off to a start because they did not win that first game against the Bucs. Had they won the first game against the Bucs, it'd be 2-3. It would be a lot more open to coming back and getting in the playoff race and take much less of a hot streak. You get one, then you only have to win one of the next three to be 500. You feel a lot better. You lose this one, it's going to be pretty tough. So it is a big game for the season. All right, hold on. Let me slide down here. Okay, let's see. Rob says, where do you think the Vikings defense will rank this season with Flores' second year with the team? So this is a hard question because last year they overachieved and ended up with pretty good numbers defensively. And I think that some of that also had to deal with they played some quarterbacks who were really bad. Aiden O'Connell was really bad and scored 0 points. And that helped. That helped even out the Lions. It helped even out the Cincinnati game where they did have some tough moments there. This year, they've got a lot of very good opponents where if they ranked, let's just say they ranked 12th, that's where I'll put them. If they rank 12th, but they play this bunch of teams, and if they're playing healthy quarterbacks on a weekly basis, 12th would be good. 12th means you're going to win some games because of your defense and you're very solid and the bar isn't that high to get in the playoff race. I was looking at Tampa Bay last year and where they ranked, and I think it was something like 18th in offense and 9th in defense. Can you be that? Yeah, I think they can, but there is an issue with the schedule as it compares to last year. But if some quarterbacks get hurt, then it will be a lot easier. I think if Brian Flores is playing a team that has a backup quarterback or a young quarterback, your chances to win skyrocket versus playing, and this is not a hot take, but it especially skyrockets with him because of the way he plays and how rarely you see that in the NFL. So if you are another team and you're preparing on a weekly basis for this, that, and the other thing, and then you see Flores' defense is totally different and you're not an experienced quarterback who's seen it before, it's a nightmare for you, as opposed to, maybe if it's just a regular type of typical scheme. So it might depend on just how many backup quarterbacks do they end up facing throughout the year of where they rank. But I would put them right now somewhere around the range. Maybe it's a normal amount of backup quarterbacks, 2 or 3 throughout the season, somewhere like 12th. Anybody disagree with that? Is that too high, too low? Dan says, fantasy question of the day. How many yards and touchdowns does Jefferson have this year? Well, that sounds like a time to remind you that the show presented by Underdog Fantasy, and you can use the promo code PURPLE. Huh? Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. And to answer your question, I want to go very high with Justin Jefferson still. He's going to get the football a lot. Sam Darnold trusts him throughout training camp. We've seen that over and over again, and is going to push the ball to him. He pushed the ball to DJ Moore. DJ Moore had a ton of catches at the end of that 2022 season. Kevin O'Connell may try to adapt some routes to get Jefferson open underneath, to get the ball in his hands, to make sure that he's involved early and often. So I'm going to say that Jefferson ends up with 1,475 yards. Touchdowns is hard. Everybody guards him in the red zone. 6, 7 touchdowns. I'm not going to go crazy on the touchdowns, but I'll go with 1,475 yards. Bad Bo says, can you bring up practice squad guys week to week without putting them through waivers? You can now. Yes, you can elevate practice squad guys 3 times, I believe. And so if it's Myles Gaskin, they'll elevate him. And then I would guess they'll elevate him again and then look for a place to put him on the 53 if they like what they've seen from Gaskin as another back that can just help them on special teams and so forth. It's kind of a little bit of a cheat code that they used here with Myles Gaskin and only keeping the 2 running backs and CJ Ham on the roster. Though you think of it, because they have a fullback, that's an extra spot. Most teams would just have another running back there and might not even have 4 running backs on the active roster. It's only really a story because the Vikings use Ham, so it ends up being 2. But yes, they can. And that's been a great change for the NFL. Allows teams to put guys there on the practice squad and still use them. Allows veterans to be on the practice squad. That was a great change, especially for players keeping jobs, but also just the depth. What used to happen is if you'd have 10 guys on the practice squad, someone gets hurt and you just don't have anybody at that position. You have to go out and sign somebody off of nothing, as opposed to someone's on the team that can probably do that job. DJ Willie G, I think we need to keep this real. 9-8 is a successful season. I believe, Mr. Willie, that you are being real. I agree with that. I think that is being real. Anything higher than that is something went extremely right. It's 2022 levels of going right. Although I feel like the karma meter for this team has to swing back at some point. Does it not? The karma meter has gone strong against the Vikings last year with all the fumbles that they had last year, some of the injuries. They had a quarterback injury last year that maybe it goes back the other way. And then even with JJ McCarthy, that the other team fumbles this time or they recover it this time. maybe that'll happen. Jared, I think the Vikings are 1 to 2 point favorites is fine. The line has moved towards them as well. Seen quite a few betting guys thinking otherwise, though. Seen 5 or 6 on the under 6.5 wins. I just don't see it that way. I mean, none of us can ever predict if a quarterback gets hurt. And if Sam Darnold tears his freaking meniscus in week 1, then okay, they're going to win fewer than 6.5 games. Didn't Nick Mullins win 4 with San Francisco or something? I mean, to win fewer than 7 takes a very bad season. And I just think that they shouldn't have a very bad season. If they do, there's going to be a lot of ramifications. But here's the teams that won fewer than 7 games last year. New England, Tennessee, the Chargers, the Commanders, Giants, Panthers, and Cardinals. Just a real quick run through. Cardinals were tanking and had their quarterback out for half the year. Panthers accidentally tanked, but had no talent whatsoever and a rookie quarterback who played horribly and shouldn't have been playing. The Commanders, what else do you have to say there? The Giants, they lost their quarterback and still found a way to 6, and they just had no offensive line at all. Chargers were a mess. Also, Justin Herbert got hurt. Who else? Tennessee starting a rookie quarterback, Ryan Tannehill's meltdown, and then Will Levis. That's hard to win. And then just everything with the New England Patriots. Catastrophes. Teams that were in the middling ballpark. The Jets lost their quarterback, still won 7. The Colts got to 9 with Gardner Minshew. How about the Broncos? The Broncos won 8 games last year. Do you guys think the Broncos were good? Of course they weren't, but they found their way to 8. So did the Raiders. So that's more of my logic. The Bears last year were not a good team. The Falcons were not a good team. They fired their coach. They got to 7. That's really my logic is, I mean, it has to go really bad in order to get to less than 6. Let's see. Reconnected. If the Vikings exceed expectations, any chance KOC is extended during the season? I still think they should extend him tomorrow and make sure they're staying with this plan going forward and not judging it on this year. And I thought maybe this week we would get one of those, surprise everyone, we changed our minds, but not so far. With Mike McDaniel getting extended in the same timeline as O'Connell, that even makes it look more glaring that they haven't done it yet, even though the guys' records are basically the same through 2 years. Mike McDaniel doesn't have playoff wins. but you like where it's going with them. I would take them where the Dolphins are, and I would take where the Vikings are with KOC. But I don't know. Usually this organization doesn't do stuff like that. They don't negotiate in the middle of the season. It would have to be going great to do it in the middle of the season. Conrad says, got here late. Well, that's unacceptable, Conrad. But you can actually go back and watch the rest of the show if you want. So can I ask, is Jalen Nailor going into the first game healthy? I am really worried in Capitals. Conrad, we know you love your Capitals. Do I yell? You are really worried because I just read about his limited practice today. I think really worried in screaming Capitals might be only if he was not practicing at all. Less worried if someone is limited on Wednesday. That to me says there is a decent chance that player plays. If you are out completely Wednesday, it's not great. If you're out completely Thursday, it's almost a lock that you're not playing. If you're limited, then there's a shot. But as far as Jalen Nailor goes, I would not be really worried about Jalen Nailor not playing because they have other guys that can do it. And if your entire offense is contingent on your number 3 wide receiver, who's mainly a deep threat, then it's not great. But I think that they're not entirely contingent on that. And I became, throughout training camp, a Trent Sherfield enjoyer because it's a physical game out there, my friends. And when a dude plays at that position with a little bit of edge, I'll tell you who I really used to like was Robert Woods, played with edge. I thought, if I'm remembering correct, Jake Reed played with a little bit of this. A little nasty to you as a wide receiver. I think Trent Sherfield brings that. He can be that guy. Brandon Powell can be that guy. Nobody can just replace and act like Jordan Addison or Justin Jefferson, but you can replace and act like a number 3 wide receiver. So really worried is too much. I still think that they're in a good place with him to be able to play. And Addison looks like he's going in a good spot. I think really the issue with Jalen Nailor is where you'd be concerned is this going to happen all the time? Or is this going to be just this week? He's got a little ankle tweak. He's fine. He's moving on. Or is it going to be every week? It's something new with Nailor because of his history. It has to be brought up. Rob says over under last year's 20.2 points per game this year for the Vikings. That sounds about right, but I think I would probably go a little bit over that for 20. How many total points did they score last year? They scored 344 points last year, which was kind of in the same ballpark as Tampa Bay, Seattle, a little bit less than Seattle. Yeah, I think that they should be able to do a little bit more this year than that. I mean, they were playing with Dobbs, Jaron Hall. They had some really bad games mixed in with those guys. A little bit more than that. Let's see. Suck My Kiss says, is that a song? Isn't there a song like that or an album? I do think the expectation should be to win. This Suck My Kiss is, after I said the first 2 words, you all went, but this is an interesting question of how much the expectation should be to win. Because as much as you could look at next year and go, hey, draft, you mentioned the defensive tackles, you mentioned the corners, draft one of those dudes. There's a guy who made a play for Georgia that I've thought about for a week and a half. A corner. Yeah, him. Get one of those. That'll help. High draft pick would be really nice for this team in its build for going forward. But they have put a lot into this roster. This isn't a team that's torn it down. We're not talking about young players that are playing for the first time. And, well, I guess we'll see what happens with these young players. We are talking about a lot of veteran talent here that should have the expectation to win. I agree with that. Win the Super Bowl, okay, that's too much. They're not there yet. But Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, you guys are supposed to be good coaches, and you are. You should win. And I'm with the Wilfs now. I wasn't in 2022, but I'm with them now. Go win. be in the playoff race, be in that conversation. You should be there as long as Darnold is largely healthy for the entire season. Yes, of course, you should go into the season going compete for the playoffs. Otherwise, there will be a lot more questions. If they do win 6 games or they do win 5 games, to go, wow, that was horrible. Can you really do this? Can you go from winning 5 games to competing for a Super Bowl? Okay, I don't know. But if they win 8, well, all right, you're going to feel like, all right, it's a fine season. If they win 9, a little more toward that was a good job coaching. And any more than that, it's a great job coaching. So you can evaluate it. One way to do it, and I have a friend who works now in the NHL, works for a team as their analytics guy. And he created this metric to evaluate coaches based on preseason expectation over a long period of time. And what he found was that there were certain coaches who almost always were above preseason expectation. And think of Andy Reid for this. There was a number that maybe it was last year was the first time that he went under his number for preseason, which is insane since he's gotten to Kansas City. Good coaches will consistently push the needle in the right direction. Not always because quarterback injuries happen, but usually that's the case. So you should expect your coaches, but we have to grade on a curve here because it's Darnold and it's a roster that isn't full yet. So grade on that curve of what your winning expectations are. But I like that thought. Alex, feel like the defensive line depth is kind of flown under the radar. It's Harrison Phillips, who's decent against the run, and a bunch of cast-offs. Well, some cast-offs and some guys who have not been cast at all. Taki Taimani and Levi Drake Rodriguez and Jalen Redmond. These are guys who have won jobs over cast-offs, over veteran players like Jonah Williams or a draft pick like Jaquelin Roy. And there's something to be said for that. If you're going into a camp where you're facing in these battles, guys with more experience and then winning the job. So I'm intrigued by the depth. And if there's something there with Levi Drake Rodriguez, Jonathan Bullard, Jerry Tillery. Yep. Those guys are not people that are normally thought of as being locked, great veteran starters. Tillery just adds enough for this to work, but work is as far as I would go. Because Phillips is a good player for his career. He just, I think, got worn out last year and had some bad games that brought down his PFF grade. But he had normally been in the top 20, usually by PFF grade, and largely because of his run block or run stopping. If you can mix and match just a little bit with Tillery and get a little bit of pressure, just even a little bit of pressure from that spot, then it's an upgrade. And then we'll see what those other guys could do. I mean, Levi Drake Rodriguez could be interesting right away in a third down package. So just more things to work with than they had last year, but that doesn't mean it's ready. That doesn't mean it's fully set or an excellent unit. That's still probably the 20 something ranked unit in the NFL. Phil says, if Kevin keeps a balanced play calling, Sam won't have to be great to win. If he goes back to being pass heavy, it will be musical chairs at quarterback again. I tend to agree with you, Phil. If they're in a spot where they're asking Sam Darnold to throw 40 passes, then it's probably not a good position. You know, the comparison that I have not made that I really should make is Ryan Tannehill with Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill, big arm. When he was asked to be the guy in Miami with bad coaching, including Adam Gase, he was bad. And when he was given good coaching that built off a really good running back and a couple of good wide receivers in high efficiency passes, put up good numbers in won games. And he didn't throw a ton of passes. That actually might be as comparable or more than Baker or Geno Smith is Ryan Tannehill, because like Darnold, Tannehill's overall numbers were not very good, but he had moments enough for a team to believe in him and give him a chance. And in Tennessee, he was pretty good. So maybe there's something like that. That might be one I need to think about more. Suck My Kiss says, JJ McCarthy got injured. Okay. But they had plenty of time to think about who they were going to bring in as a bridge quarterback and chose Darnold. and they have built this defense, free pass for Kwesi and KOC. No, yeah, I'm saying no. But the thing is that when you talk about a free pass, is it a free pass in terms of fired? I wouldn't want to go there. I would not want to go to fire everybody and totally revamp this regime when they haven't gotten a chance to see it all the way through. That's been the most important thing to me. Of course, you're evaluating everything on how this works out. I think you have to do it on a curve because of the timeline and because it's headed in the right direction. But there's consequences to losing that don't have to be fired. That could be just more pressure into the future and less patience into the future. SETI079 says, are you worried about the Giants' speed on offense? A little bit because of the Vikings corners. And we are looking at a Stephon Gilmore who has not practiced much really at all. They have some players like Wan'Dale Robinson, who I'm intrigued by, Jalen Hyatt, who I'm intrigued by, hasn't been brought up really at all. And Malik Neighbors obviously is a freak. So they actually have probably the best group of guys receiver wise around Daniel Jones. And I'm known for doing this, I think, at this point of saying I give quarterback X more credit than others, but at least you guys are probably in the same bucket with Daniel Jones because he beat the Vikings in a playoff game. I go back and look at his receivers and go, oh my gosh, how bad has this guy's receivers been over the years? So yes, I would say it is a concern to have Malik Neighbors, of course, but Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and Darius Slayton, that's not the worst group I've ever seen of wide receivers. Can he actually get them the ball, make plays? He did a little bit against the Vikings. Maybe he will again, but that's going to be kind of interesting. Lee says, PFF says the Vikings have the third most difficult schedule this year. That is why I think Vegas is so low on them. I've seen different things, different versions of the schedule rankings. I looked at the quarterback tiers, and they did a thing about how difficult the Vikings schedule is. And, they did everybody, like how difficult the quarterback schedule is. They did every team, and the Vikings were somewhere in the middle of quarterback tier schedules, which is maybe the most telling thing. But when you do a schedule, who's got the hardest schedule? How do you know what somebody's going to look like in week 9 or who's going to be healthy in week 9? Sometimes you can have a much easier schedule than it looks like, even just because of when you play those teams. So that one's a little bit tougher. Sam says, can you give me a 3-player touchdown parlay? Whew. It's a lot to ask for me. I don't want to have your fate as a gambler in my hands here with a 3-player touchdown parlay, but I'll do it anyway, just for you. How about we go Aaron Jones? Let's see. Darius Slayton. I'll say there's going to be a lot of tension on Malik Neighbors and Jordan Addison. If he plays, I assume he's going to play because they'll be just paying so much attention to Jefferson. How about that? I don't know what that does for you, but there you go. Because you asked and because you're here taking the time to watch the show and ask a question. Thank you for doing that. Let's see. Okay. SETI says the Giants-Vikings game will come down to which offensive line pass protection holds up, as so often is the case in the NFL. No disagreement there. It's really more specifically whose game wrecker wrecks the other team's game. Is it Grenard? Does Dallas Turner do something? Is it Van Ginkel? Is it Lawrence? Is it Burns? Whichever one of those guys becomes unblockable, it could be the team that wins. But there's all sorts of factors that go into it, all kinds of different things. Daniel says Giants 24-21. Let's see. You guys are talking for some reason about other shows that you like and don't like. So I'll just leave that to you guys to have that conversation. TXYU, if the Vikings go 0-17, they should draft Travis Hunter number 1. Boy, if they go 0-17, those live chats are going to be wild. If they end up with a top draft pick and have a chance at Travis Hunter, is he playing receiver? Is he playing corner? There's a lot more earning potential at wide receiver, and he really looks special at wide receiver. My guess is that he leans in that direction. But if he's playing corner, then maybe at the top of the draft, he looks like a special talent. And sometimes it's a little bit frustrating to watch on Saturdays when Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are playing for the rest of that team, which doesn't really seem like it's very good to me. Not sure that it's the best coach, but it's definitely not the best recruited team that is out there. Up North says, didn't the Wilfs already say they are not re-signing Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and KOC till after the year? That was what Mark Wilf said, that they were not having that conversation right now. That was the way that Mark Wilf put it to us, is that they weren't talking extension right now. And I would guess that means not until next year, that after this season that they would have that. And what they might want to decide on is it going to be, if they win 10 or 11 games and they just kick butt all season long, Darnold's really good, they're rolling along, great defense, it'll be an easy choice for a long-term extension. 4 more years, whatever it is. Sign them up. Same with Flores, whatever it costs. If you win 6 or 7, then they might just want to wait and see a little bit. I think that they should try to get him signed up to a 3-year extension to give them enough time, both of them, to work this out and see how they can build around JJ McCarthy. That's really the question here. How can you build around JJ McCarthy? And they can't answer that today. They can answer that deep into the future. Oh yeah, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Yeah, that's right. For the song Suck My Kiss. Yeah, thank you. But you can't find out today how they're going to build around the most important player of the future, right? So let's find that out first and then talk about firing people. If this was an Urban Meyer situation or Matt Patricia or Joe Judge, and the coach was just crazy and was abusing people, kicking the kicker, had no idea who played for the other teams, whatever, right? All the stuff that came out about those types of coaches. Okay, but we already have a sample size to know that O'Connell's not nuts and has a good locker room, good leadership group, all that stuff that he's been able to form. So that right there is a baseline enough to say, well, I don't want to have the discussion about if they have a bad season and firing the coach and going out and doing another coach search. What it really would be is how much pressure is on going into 2025. Is it going to be a short-term extension where they're still kind of evaluating year to year? Or is it going to be, all right, we're locked in. This is who we're going forward with. I think that's the difference. And I think that's okay if the Wilfs want to do it that way. Just personally, I don't like the idea of people coaching for their jobs or GMing for their jobs, especially. Coaching for their jobs, maybe coaches always feel that way, but GMing for your job is not a good idea, because then you end up trading a 4th for Chris Herndon because you're just desperate. Just a Super Bowl Vike. There's talk that JJ McCarthy may come back week 17 or 18. I can shut that down for you right now. He cannot come back week 18 or 17 or 18. He can't. So there shouldn't be talk. If there's talk, tell whoever's talking to stop talking. He can't. He's on season-ending IR. He's not playing this year. Nope, can't do it. And just by the way that his injury works, well, he will be recovered by then. But do you want his first NFL start to be coming off of missing 15 weeks? I wouldn't want that. I would rather have him just go through to next year. And I actually did think it was interesting that Kevin O'Connell laid out his plan to have JJ McCarthy in his office, going over stuff, going over the scheme, going over the why to plays, that he's going to meet with him every single week. And he knows how important JJ McCarthy is to this thing. That's a great idea, by the way. Alex says, have you seen Jerry Tillery's PFF grades? They're awful. At this point, I have looked at so many freaking stats in the offseason that I could probably tell you off the top of my head every player's career PFF grade. What I could tell you is that Jerry Tillery's PFF grade from last year was 67 point something, and that he had, I believe, 27 pressures, 25 pressures, and that the majority of those pressures came on third down pass rushes. And if Jerry Tillery plays this season and has a 67 PFF grade and ends up with 20 something pressures and the majority come on third downs, then he's been a good signing for them. They did not have that last year at all. If he ends up having his previous PFF grades, which were, as you said, awful for a very bad Chargers team, then that's going to be a failure. As simple as that. It will be. But they're signing him off what they saw last year, much more than years before that. I think that it looked pretty good in training camp against the Browns when we actually saw him go against another team. This is not me saying it looked great. This wasn't Aaron Donald Tillery. I just think that when he was drafted, he was a first round pick and he was expected to just play every snap and be great and be a driving force player. But I think of it like Alexander Madison and maybe KJ Osborne, but Madison is instructive that certain players like Alexander Madison fit really well into certain roles. And if you try to bump them up the role, it's a Peter principle, where the Peter principle is the idea that people in businesses get elevated until they're incompetent, until they're over their head in their role. And so you get managers that are over their head in their role who are really good in their previous role. In fact, The Office is really about this. Michael Scott is over his head as a manager, but was a great salesperson. He's the Peter principle. That's Madison. That's probably Tillery, who at a certain level in the NFL is an effective player. Patrick Jones is this. I believe, if I'm trying to quote PFF grades off the top of my head, it was something like a 62 PFF grade in 2022 and was like a 37 last year because he was asked to play 600 plus snaps and he was in over his head. That's the idea with what they're asking Tillery to do. And I don't know if it's going to be game changing, but I think it could be better than it was last year. Just a Super Bowl, Vike. I'm intrigued with what the offense can do with Darnold, but I'm excited and pumped to see what the defense can do. Do you think offhand the Vikings will be top 10 or top 5, if not top 5? Top 5 would be insane. With this schedule, that would be crazy if they were. That means it's gone unbelievably well, and it's one of the biggest stories in football. If with this schedule they were that good on defense, top 10 is not out of the picture. Borderline top 10. They would have to have at least one corner who we could say is a superstar in order to put them in the top 5. They're not there yet. They're not there with the interior. I'm defending Jerry Tillery in his role, but this isn't a defensive tackle unit that is changing the game, which I think you need to be great, or at least one guy. Horn fan. Do you think Gabe Murphy will be an instant starter when he comes off IR? Not a starter. The starters are Van Ginkel, Grenard, and then Dallas Turner's next man up after that. Jihad Ward would probably play in front of him. Murphy's an undrafted free agent. I mean, they liked him, but he'll make the team. It's just someone they're going to develop. And maybe he ends up with a role toward the middle or end of the season, but not someone who's going to take away any snaps from Grenard or Van Ginkel. They get some injuries, though. He could be in there. Let's see. TXYU. Dallas Turner should have near 10 sacks this season. Quick and strong off the edge. The next Dwight Freeney. Doesn't remind me of Dwight Freeney. Dwight Freeney was huge, I think. Wasn't he big? Wasn't Dwight Freeney big? How big was Dwight Freeney? I remember him being big. Maybe I was just small. Let me see. Dwight Freeney. Let's get a height and weight on him. 268. Yeah. 268. Not tall, but thick. 270 pounds. That's not Dallas Turner. I think he's got Von Miller's size and vibes. That's a very high mark to reach. I think 5.5, 6 sacks would be a good year for Turner. because of the other guys that they're going to bring along the other guys, or that they're going to bring along Turner behind the other guys. So he won't be playing enough snaps to get 10 sacks. But if he gets 5.5 and they're in key situations, then you're in pretty good shape. Rob with a big element to this game. Don't forget the Giants are wearing their hideous throwback uniforms. I am not aware of these uniforms. Am I going to like them because they're old and you think they're hideous? Because I like things like that because the old. So if it's the creamsicles with Tampa Bay, I like it. If it's the Seattle Seahawks throwbacks, I like it because that's what they were wearing when I was a kid. So are these Giants ones going to look cool or are they really bad? I guess I'll find out. Josh, you think Kwesi will regret letting Jaren Hall go? Could have been a competent backup on the cheap. Apparently not. Apparently he could not have been a competent backup according to them, or they would have kept him. And I'm not sure that he could be either. I think the game was too fast for him. And he's quite small. He's not a great athlete at this level, doesn't have good arm strength at this level. No, I don't think quarterbacks like this you almost ever regret giving up on. Really good guy. I think that he'll be a coach somewhere at some point. He may bounce around teams because they like him as a practice squad type, but I think a lot of you wanted to really like something there with Jaren Hall that wasn't actually there. And he did a good job in the preseason helping with the evaluations, but this is not something that I think they'll ever think about again with Jaren Hall. No disrespect. It's just kind of the fact of the matter. Not very many guys are Brock Purdy. There's a lot of guys that just sort of bounce around. Oh gosh says, crazy how everyone's saying Sam's going to throw 4 to 5 picks like he's going to be in the game after 3 picks. 4 or 5 picks. Whoa. I don't know who's saying that. That would be crazy. Has he even ever thrown 5 picks in a game? I don't think so. Garrett says over under 3.5 rushing touchdowns for Darnold. I will go with the over. I think he likes to run. When he was in Carolina, he liked to run. He's got some wheels to him. He can scramble. Let's see. Yeah, you guys are rolling. You've pointed out. Yeah, this has been a long stream. You guys are rolling. I didn't even notice. I was planning on an hour and a half, but we went a little longer than that. Suck My Kiss says, this has really been your night. Suck My Kiss says, I'm wondering why our schedule is so difficult this year. How do they determine difficulty of schedules each year? I thought it was why wins and losses. Some of it is, but you rotate divisions. This year, they just ended up with the AFC South, which has the Texans in it, and the league put the Texans at the front of the schedule. They also ended up with the NFC West, which is very good. I think all the teams are competitive there. Even Arizona is going to be better. So you play certain divisions, and then the rest are determined by first place, second, third, fourth. And they were third place last year, so they play other teams that were in third place. Like, is that the New York Jets? That's how you end up with the Jets. So that's how it's figured out. If you want more details, you have to go to someone else because I think the formula is kind of crazy, but that's the basis of it. Let's see. First name, last name. How likely is a Mullins extension? Could be a better option for QB2. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. When it comes to Jaren Hall, Nick Mullins, backup quarterbacks, man, they bounce around. People sign them and they rarely help you. So Nick Mullins is a great guy to have in the locker room. I love that he plays like no one's watching. The guy has guts, toughness, ton of football IQ. I mean, all these backup quarterbacks, if a guy stays in the league like Nick Mullins as QB2, much respect. Yeah, I agree with, oh gosh, he's got a dog in him. So maybe he'll be the backup. But as per always, if JJ McCarthy's the starter and the backup has to play, well, then another season is not in good shape. So I'm not really too concerned almost ever with who the backup is. JH, when I see the schedule, I could see them potentially starting 1-6 or 0-7. What games other than the Giants will they be favored during their first 7 games? What would happen if that were to occur? So they will not be favored more likely than not in most of those games. Luckily, Las Vegas succeeds on teams who aren't favored winning. So that's not some sort of death knell to your team's chances. I think of it like this: San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay. What are your percentage chances of winning those games? Probably 45% against the Packers, 40% against the other teams, but you're at home. Maybe it's 42%. You just have to win one of those three if you beat the Giants. And math people could figure this out. What's your odds of hitting once on three things that are 42%? It's probably decent, right? Somebody who's good at math, figure that out for me. So I think they could get to 2-2 to start the season, and then you're going to be okay. After that, then we start to get into guys get hurt, who you're playing, how they're playing at the time. They come out of the bye week. The divisional games are a little bit better of a chance. But to your point, if they were to have a start like that, I think you got to start selling pieces, that there's no other option. They have to start selling pieces after that. You would have to try to move Aaron Jones if he's healthy, try to move Harrison Phillips or Cam Bynum. If you're not going to keep them, then you got to start looking for trades. They could turn the season around to the point of being competitive, as in maybe 6 wins from there. But if you've gotten to that low, it's going to be a really, really long road back. Is it really 69%? Because that would be funny if it is. But I think you're just saying that because it's funny. And it was. David says, I have more optimism for this team and its cultivation and development since before 2017. Oh, it's not 69%. That's too bad. That would have been a remarkable, confluence of numbers to come up with that beautiful number right there. But I guess it didn't make much sense to me because I gave even numbers. Anyway, yeah, I think that there have been very few teams. So imagine, I think of this sometimes. Imagine if you are 18-year-old Viking fan, right? And you were a little kid now in 2017. And when the last time they rebuilt this team, you probably don't remember it because they were in that mode from 2015 all the way until literally last year. Gotta win, gotta win, gotta win, gotta win. There was no step back. There was no retool. How can we look toward the future? It was just gotta win, gotta win, gotta win. And now I think that there is more of this vision. Will it come to fruition? That's what we're going to see. But there is more of a vision since there was when Mike Zimmer took over quite some time ago. But that's how long ago it was. We're going all the way back 10 years, the last time that they've had a season like this, which I would equate to a 2014 or 15. 2 more questions, and then I'm out of voice for tonight. Bad Bo, what position do the Vikings still need to address? I mean, this year or like now that's over, but you mean if they're talking about the total roster build in the future, it's very, very clear. Very clear. It's defensive tackle and corner are the positions, and guard. Everybody needs guards, but defensive tackle and corner. If you get stars at those positions, then you're talking about a very, very dangerous defense with linebackers, outside linebackers. But until you're there, I don't think you can be great without great corners and defensive tackles. Horn fan says, I thought you were an analytics guy. Aren't you good at math? No, actually terrible. I actually am terrible at math. Yep. But there's a little bit of a difference between being an analytics person and being a mathematician. So what I do is I utilize the work of mathematicians to use it in context with what I know about reporting on football. Just for example, I texted a very talented mathematician earlier today, and I said, how do I find out how often the Vikings use 21 personnel? And he sent me back an answer for an article because someone else wrote a program that could take that data and put it together, but I can't. The highest level of math I took is whatever was in high school. I took stats 1 and 2 in community college. I'm not a mathematician. I am a journalist who studies analytics. 2 different things. So there you go. All right. Okay, real quick. Let's see. Dorian, a common question that comes up on the show. If Darnold is decent and not amazing, could he be retained as QB2? If he is, I think he would go to a place where he could compete for a spot. There's always going to be that in the league. There's always going to be a team that has a quarterback competition. You're not always going to be set. The Raiders. Darnold's better than those Raiders quarterbacks, right? He would have been competing there. Let's see. Be honest. TXYU. I am always honest with you guys. 2 hours and 1 minute and 7 seconds. Straight up honesty with you guys. And counting. You saw both McCarthy and Kirk practice. Who looked better? Kirk, obviously. I mean, come on. Kirk was one of the 5 most highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, he's a great practice quarterback. He could hit deep shots, deliver the ball on time, run the offense, run the 2-minute. I mean, he's one of the best statistical quarterbacks. I mean, top 10, 12 of the last decade. I mean, Kirk, it was never about whether Kirk was good. Everybody knew Kirk was good. It was whether you could be enough around him with his contract to get over the top and compete for a Super Bowl, which they could not. But Kirk is a really good quarterback, especially really good in practice. McCarthy, though, more raw talent. No question about it. More arm strength, more mobility. And one thing that was similar to them is a command. 2-minute drill command. You saw it with McCarthy. Even when he failed, you saw it. Getting guys lined up, being in charge. That's what you saw. But Kirk, I mean, he was a guy that could just run a whole offense. He was good. Okay, I that's funny. All right, let's end on this. Since now I'm officially out of voice. I did WCCO radio. I did North Dakota radio. I did a Giants podcast. I did XM radio today. I did the fantasy football show, and now 2 hours with you guys live. And I still got to write 2 articles. How excited am I for football, guys? Nobody could ever say this guy isn't ready for week 1. So I'm ending with this. Be honest, who is better, Jaron Hall or John David Booty? That's good. That's good. Oh gosh, that's good. There you go. I'll let the world decide that. Thanks so much, everybody. I need to go drink some tea or something. Actually, you know what? I've got a better choice. It's Diet Dr. Pepper. That's what I need to have. And I'm going to go write some stuff about this football team. Let's go. So thanks, everybody, for another super, super fun chat. And we will be doing this again tomorrow night. Me and Manny. Tomorrow night, Thursday night conversation. Vikings, I'll be out at their locker room. I'm going to slip in some golf in the morning, and we'll talk to you guys later. Football, everybody. We're here. We're almost here. Let's go.